Emma Thompson sat by her small kitchen window, watching the rain streak down the glass. At 32, she had grown used to quiet evenings alone in her tiny flat above Miller's Bakery. The smell of fresh bread always drifted up through the floorboards, but tonight it could not lift the heavy feeling in her chest. Her grandmother Rose had passed away just 1 month ago, and Emma still felt lost without her. Rose had been the only family Emma truly had left. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 18, and Rose had become her anchor, her safe place in the world. Emma worked as a librarian in the small English town of Millbrook. It was a quiet job that suited her gentle nature, but lately she felt like she was just going through the motions. Every day was the same. She would unlock the library doors, organize returned books, help a few visitors find what they needed, and then lock up again at 5 o'clock. The other librarians were kind enough, but they had their own families to go home to. Emma usually stopped by the grocery store, bought something simple for dinner, and spent her evenings reading or watching television. She had always been shy, and making friends had never come easily to her. Now, with Rose gone, Emma felt more alone than ever. Sometimes she would catch herself reaching for the phone to call her grandmother, only to remember that no one would answer. The letter from the lawyer had arrived 3 days ago. Emma inherited Rose's cottage by the sea, the same cottage where she had spent magical childhood summers. But there was a problem. Rose's distant relatives, cousins Emma barely knew, wanted to sell the property quickly. They had given Emma just 1 weekend to clear out anything she wanted to keep. Emma had not been back to the cottage since Rose's funeral. The thought of going through her grandmother's belongings made her heart ache. But she knew she had to do it. There might be photographs, jewelry, or other precious memories that would be lost forever if she did not save them. Saturday morning came grey and drizzly. Emma borrowed her neighbor's small car and drove the winding road to Rose's cottage. The little house sat on a cliff overlooking the sea, just as she remembered it. The garden was overgrown now, and paint peeled from the window frames, but it still looked like the place where Emma had felt most happy as a child. She turned the old brass key in the lock and stepped inside. The cottage smelled like roses, lavender, soap, and the sea air that always drifted through the windows. Everything was exactly as her grandmother had left it. Teacups in the sink, reading glasses on the kitchen table, a half-finished crossword puzzle beside her favorite chair. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she wiped them away and began to work. She started in the sitting room, carefully packing photographs and small treasures into boxes. Then she moved to the bedroom, folding Rose's clothes and setting aside a few special dresses that held memories. Finally, she climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. She had played up here as a child, but now it seemed smaller and more cramped than she remembered. Dust danced in the thin beams of sunlight that filtered through the small window. Emma began sorting through boxes of old Christmas decorations, school reports, and faded photographs. The floorboards creaked and groaned under her feet as she moved. Round the small space, near the corner, where the roof sloped down low, one board felt loose when she stepped on it. Curious, Emma knelt down and lifted the board carefully. Underneath, wrapped in old cloth, was something she had never expected to find. A bundle of letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted them out. The paper felt fragile and yellowed with age. The top letter was addressed in beautiful, flowing handwriting. Miss Rose Hartley. Emma stared at the name. Rose Hartley. Her grandmother had always been Rose Thompson. Married to grandfather William Thompson. The postmark read Florence, Italy, and was dated June 20th, 1952. At the bottom, in the same elegant script, It was signed with all my love. Michael. Emma's heart began to beat faster. Who was Michael? And why had her grandmother kept these letters hidden away for 70 years? Why had she never mentioned anyone named Michael? Or that she had ever been to Italy? With trembling fingers, Emma untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. The paper crackled softly as she unfolded it. The words were written in faded blue ink, but they were still clear enough to read as Emma read the first few lines. Her grandmother's secret past began to unfold before her eyes. The words spoke of young love, of dreams and art, of a life that Rose had never shared with anyone, not even with Emma, who thought she knew her grandmother's story completely. Emma realized she had discovered something far more valuable than any photograph or piece of jewelry. These letters held the key to understanding a side of her grandmother she had never known existed, and perhaps hidden in Rose's secret story. Emma might find the missing pieces of her own heart and the answer to why she had always felt like something important was missing from her life. Emma could not sleep that night. The bundle of letters sat on her grandmother's kitchen table like a treasure chest waiting to be opened. She made herself a cup of tea and lit the old candles that Rose always kept in the cupboard. The soft light flickered across the yellowed pages as Emma carefully untied the blue ribbon once more. She decided to read the letters in order, starting from the oldest date. As she opened each one, a story began to unfold that took her breath away. This was not the grandmother she had known. This was a young woman full of passion and dreams. The first letter was dated June 1951. Rose had been 22 years old, working as a nurse in a military hospital in Florence, Italy. The war had ended, but there were still many wounded soldiers who needed care. Emma had never known her grandmother had served as a nurse, let alone that she had lived in Italy. Michael's letters painted pictures with words. He wrote about the beautiful city of Florence, about the art he was studying, and most of all, about Rose in one letter. He described their first meeting. I was sketching by the river when you walked past in your white nurse uniform. You stopped to look at my drawing. And when you smiled, I knew I had found something more beautiful than any painting. Emma learned that Michael Harrison was a young British man, just 24 years old, who had come to Italy to study classical painting at an art academy. He had dreams of becoming a great artist, of traveling the world and capturing beauty on canvas. But meeting Rose had changed everything for him. Their romance bloomed between Rose's long shifts at the hospital and Michael's classes. They would meet in small cafes, walk along the Arno River, and share their dreams under the Italian stars. Rose wrote about feeling alive for the first time in her life, about discovering parts of herself she never knew existed. Michael showed me how to really see things, Rose had written to a friend back home. He taught me to notice the way light falls on old stone buildings, how shadows dance across the water, how every moment can be beautiful if you just pay attention. Emma discovered that her grandmother had not only fallen in love with Michael, but also with art itself. Michael had given her painting supplies, and Rose had spent her free time learning to draw and paint. She wrote about the joy she felt when she mixed colors on a palette for the first time, about the peace that came over her when she held a paintbrush. But as Emma continued reading, the tone of the letters began to change. News from England was not good. Rose's father had fallen ill with a serious condition that left him unable to work. Her mother was struggling to keep the family shop running alone. Rose's younger brother was still in school and could not help Dot at the same time. Michael faced his own difficult choice. A prestigious art school in London had offered him a teaching position. But there were conditions. He needed to prove he was responsible and settled. The job would give him security, but it meant giving up his dream of being a traveling artist. The letters from this period were full of pain and confusion. Rose and Michael both knew that their time in Florence was coming to an end, but neither wanted to face the reality of what that meant for their future together. "How can I ask you to give up everything for me?" Rose wrote in one letter. "And how can I abandon my family when they need me most? But how can I live without you?" Michael's response was equally heartbroken. "I would give up the teaching position, give up everything, if I thought we could build a life together. But I have no money, no way to support us, and I know you cannot turn your back on your family. We are caught between love and duty, and there seems to be no way to choose both." The final letters were the hardest for Emma to read. Rose and Michael had made their decision. Rose would return to England to help her family, and Michael would take the teaching job in London. They promised to write, to wait for each other, to find a way to be together someday. But Emma knew from her grandmother's life that someday had never come. Rose had returned to Millbrook, where she eventually married William Thompson, Emma's grandfather. It had been a good marriage. William was kind and steady, and he had loved Rose deeply. But now Emma understood why her grandmother had always seemed to carry a quiet sadness with her. Emma remembered how Rose would sometimes stand at the kitchen window, looking out at the sea with a distant expression. She would hum old songs under her breath and get a faraway look in her eyes. Emma had always wondered what her grandmother was thinking about during those moments. Now she knew. Rose had been thinking about a young artist in Italy, about dreams of painting and travel, about a love that had been real and deep, but impossible to keep. As Emma finished reading the last letter, tears rolled down her cheeks. Her grandmother had sacrificed her great love and her artistic dreams for a duty and family responsibility. She had chosen to be the person her family needed her to be, even though it meant giving up the person she had dreamed of becoming. But Emma also felt a strange sense of comfort. Finally, she understood the gentle sadness that had always lived in her grandmother's eyes, and why Rose had always encouraged Emma to follow her dreams, whatever they might be. Emma could not concentrate on anything after reading those letters for days. She sat in her small flat above the bakery, thinking about Michael Harrison. What had become of him? Had he taken that teaching job in London? Did he ever think about her grandmother Rose during all those years? The questions haunted Emma's thoughts. She found herself unable to focus on her work at the library. When people asked for help finding books, she would stare at them blankly for a moment before remembering where she was. Her mind was always somewhere else, imagining a young man in Florence, painting by the river where he had first met Rose, after a week of sleepless nights and distracted days. Emma made a decision that surprised even herself. She had never been the type of person to do anything impulsive or adventurous, but something about her grandmother's story had awakened a part of her that she did not know existed. Emma asked her supervisor at the library for 2 weeks of vacation time. She had not taken a real holiday in 3 years, so her request was easily approved. Then she did something she had never done before in her life. She booked a trip to Italy. Emma had never traveled abroad alone. The thought of flying to a foreign country where she did not speak the language frightened her, but it also excited her in a way she had never experienced. She packed the bundle of letters carefully in her suitcase, along with a few old photographs of her grandmother that she had found in the cottage. The flight to Florence felt like a dream. Emma pressed her face to the airplane window as they flew over the Alps, watching the mountains give way to the rolling hills of Tuscany. She thought about Rose making this same journey more than 70 years ago, probably by train, going to serve as a nurse in a foreign land. Florence was even more beautiful than Rose had described in her letters. Emma walked through the narrow cobblestone streets, over ancient bridges, and along the Arno River where Rose and Michael had fallen in love. Everything felt familiar. As if she had been here before through her grandmother's words, Emma spent her first day just walking round the city, trying to imagine what it had looked like in 1951. She found the hospital where Rose had worked. It was now a modern medical center, but the old stone building still stood behind it. She sat by the river where Michael had been sketching when they first met, watching the light change on the water just as he had described in his letters on her second day. Emma began her real search. She found the art academy that Michael had attended, though it had changed over the years. What had once been a large school was now small gallery and workshop space. Emma stood outside for several minutes, gathering courage before she walked through the door. Inside, the walls were covered with beautiful paintings and drawings. An elderly Italian woman with silver hair and kind eyes was arranging flowers in a vase near the window. She looked up when Emma entered and smiled warmly. Emma's Italian was very limited, but she managed to explain in broken sentences and gestures that she was looking for information about someone who had studied there long ago. The woman, whose name was Sophia, spoke excellent English and invited Emma to sit down. When Emma showed Sophia the letters, the old woman's eyes immediately filled with tears. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the yellowed pages. See, Sophia said, her voice full of emotion. Michael Harrison, I remember him well. He was my teacher for many years, you know. Such a talented man, such a gentle soul, but always so sad, always with this look in his eyes like he was seeing something far away. Sophia told Emma that Michael had indeed taken the teaching job in London, but he had returned to Florence every summer for 40 years to teach at the academy. He never married, never seemed to find anyone who could touch his heart the way Rose had. He would paint the same woman over and over, Sophia said softly. Always the same face, a beautiful young nurse with kind eyes and a gentle smile. We all wondered who she was, but Michael never talked about her. He would just say that she was someone very special who had changed his life. Sophia led Emma to a back room that served as storage for the Academy's collection. When she turned on the lights, Emma gasped. Covering an entire wall were dozens of paintings, all of her grandmother Rose. There was Rose in her white nurse uniform, Rose laughing at something just out of view, Rose reading a book by the river, Rose looking out at the sea with that same distant expression Emma remembered so well. Every painting was beautiful and full of love. Michael had captured something in Rose's face that Emma had never seen in photographs, a joy and aliveness that must have existed only during those magical months in Florence. He painted one every year, Sophia explained gently. Always on June 15th, he said, that was the day they met. Michael died 2 years ago, but before he passed away, he left very specific instructions with me. Sophia walked to an old desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. On the outside, in Michael's careful handwriting, was written Emma Thompson. Emma's heart nearly stopped. How had Michael known her name? How had he known she would come looking for him someday? Inside the envelope was a letter addressed to Rose's family and a small brass key. The letter was short but beautiful. I have loved your Rose every day of my life. Though we chose different paths, she gave me the greatest gift, the memory of pure love. I hope her family will accept this small token of what she meant to me. He, Sophia explained, opened a safety deposit box at a bank in the city center. Michael had left instructions that if anyone from Rose's family ever came looking for him, they should receive whatever was in that box. Emma's hands shook as she held the key, wondering what Michael had left for them, and marveling at the love that had lasted a lifetime. The trip to Florence had changed something deep inside Emma. When she returned to Millbrook, Everything looked different to her. The cottage by the sea, which she had been planning to sell, now seemed like a place full of secrets waiting to be discovered. Michael's gift had been more generous than Emma could have ever imagined. The safety deposit box contained his life savings, along with detailed instructions for creating a scholarship fund for young artists who needed help following their dreams. But more than the money, Emma treasured the final letter Michael had written to Rose's family. In it, he had shared memories of Rose that no one else knew. He wrote about how she would hum while she painted, how she always mixed her colors in the same careful way, and how her eyes would light up when she discovered something beautiful. Michael had kept Rose's memory alive in his heart for 70 years, and now he was sharing that gift with Emma. But Emma felt like there was still more to discover about her grandmother. She had spent only one weekend clearing out the cottage before her trip to Italy. Now she wanted to search more carefully, to see if Rose had left other clues about the person she had been inside. Emma started in the sitting room, looking behind books and under cushions. She found nothing unusual. In the bedroom, she searched through drawers and closets more thoroughly than before. Still nothing. But when she went down to the cellar, something caught her attention. The cellar was cool and dark, filled with shelves of old preserving jars that Rose had used for making jam and pickles. But in the far corner, behind rows of dusty jars, Emma noticed something that looked out of place. There were several large, flat packages wrapped in old cloth and tied with string. Emma's heart began to race as she carefully moved the jars and pulled out the first package. When she untied the string and pulled away the cloth, she gasped out loud. Inside was a painting, a beautiful landscape of Millbrook's harbor painted in soft blues and greens. Quickly, Emma unwrapped the other packages. There were dozens of paintings, all carefully preserved and hidden away. Some showed familiar scenes round Millbrook, the lighthouse on the hill, the main street in winter, the wild flowers that grew along the coastal path. Others were portraits of people Emma recognized: her grandfather William, her father as a young boy, and even one of Emma herself as a small child. But what took Emma's breath away were the paintings of Italy. Rose had painted the Italian countryside from memory, over and over again. There were views of Florence, the Arno River, old stone buildings covered in ivy, and sunny gardens filled with olive trees. These paintings were full of warmth and longing, painted by someone who had never forgotten a place that had changed her life. Emma sat on the cellar floor, surrounded by her grandmother's secret artwork, and cried. Rose had never stopped painting, even after she had given up her dreams of being an artist. Even after she had returned to England to care for her family, she had found ways to keep creating, tucked behind the paintings. Emma found something else, a small diary with a worn leather cover. She opened it carefully and began to read her grandmother's private thoughts. The diary entries went back many years. Rose had written about her daily life, caring for her sick father, helping in the family shop, raising Emma's father, and later, being a wife and mother. But woven through all of these ordinary events were thoughts about art and beauty and the creative spirit that had never died inside her. One entry, written when Emma's father was still a baby, said, "I woke early this morning before anyone else was awake. I went to the kitchen and watched the sunrise over the sea while I painted. For 1 hour, I was not just a mother or a daughter or a shopkeeper. I was the person I used to be in Florence." Some dreams don't die. They just find new ways to live. Another entry, written years later, said, "I do not regret the choices I made. William is a good husband, and I love the life we have built together. My father lived 8 more years because I came home to care for him. I was there for every important moment in my son's childhood. These are gifts that matter more than any painting I could have created. But in these quiet morning hours, when I paint, I feel connected to the part of me that once dreamed of being an artist. That part of me is not lost. It is just hidden. Like these paintings, Emma realized that she had inherited much more than just her grandmother's cottage. She had inherited Rosa's artistic spirit, her love of beauty, and her belief that creativity could survive even when life demanded other choices. As a child, Emma had loved to draw and paint. She had spent hours with her colored pencils creating pictures of everything she saw. But when she got older, her parents had encouraged her to be practical. Art is a nice hobby, they had said, but you need a real job, something stable and secure. So Emma had become a librarian. It was safe, predictable, and provided a steady income. But she had never felt truly happy or fulfilled. Now, sitting in her grandmother's cellar surrounded by decades of hidden artwork, Emma understood why. She picked up one of Rosa's old paintbrushes. It felt familiar in her hand, as if it belonged there. Without really thinking about what she was doing, Emma found an old canvas and began to paint. What emerged was simple but honest. A view of the sea from Rosa's kitchen window, painted with all the love and longing that Emma had discovered in those precious letters. As she painted, Emma felt something awakening in her heart that had been sleeping for 20 years. That night, as she sat in Rosa's kitchen looking at her first painting in decades, Emma made a decision that would change her life forever. Emma stood in the doorway of what had once been her grandmother's sitting room and smiled. 6 months had passed since she had discovered those precious letters in the attic, and the old cottage by the sea had been completely transformed. The decision to change her life had not been easy. Emma had spent many sleepless nights wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. She had a steady job at the library, a small but comfortable flat, and a predictable routine. Was she crazy, too? Give all of that up to chase a dream? But every time she looked at her grandmother's hidden paintings, every time she thought about Michael's lifelong love for Rose, Emma knew she had to try. Some opportunities only come once in a lifetime, and Emma did not want to spend the rest of her years wondering what might have been. The first step had been the hardest. Emma had walked into the library on a Monday morning and given her notice. Her supervisor had been shocked, and her co-workers had thought she had lost her mind. "You're giving up a good job to do what?" they had asked. But Emma had felt more certain about this decision than she had ever felt about anything in her life. Using Michael's generous gift, Emma had transformed Rosa's cottage into something wonderful. The sitting room became a bright, airy studio with large windows that let in the sea light. The dining room was converted into a classroom where people could come to learn painting and drawing. Every wall was covered with Rosa's beautiful artwork, finally brought out of hiding after so many years. Emma had also hung reproductions of Michael's portraits of Rose throughout the space. Together, Rosa's paintings and Michael's portraits told the story of their love in a way that words never could. Visitors would often stop and stare at the paintings, moved by the tenderness and longing they could see in every brushstroke. The Arts Center offered free classes to anyone who wanted to learn. Regardless of their age or experience, Emma had been nervous about teaching at first, but she discovered that she had inherited more than just her grandmother's artistic talent. She had also inherited Rosa's gentle way with people and her ability to help others see beauty in the world around them. Emma taught painting 3 days a week, and the classes quickly filled up with people from all over Millbrook and the surrounding villages. Her students ranged from young children to elderly people who had always wanted to try painting but had never had the chance. On the other days, Emma worked on her own art. She painted views of the sea, portraits of her students, and scenes from round Millbrook. But her favourite paintings were the ones she created from her imagination, pictures of Rose and Michael in Florence, walking by the river, laughing together in small cafes, sharing quiet moments in Italian gardens. The most touching moment had come just last week. An elderly man named Peter had brought his 8-year-old granddaughter Lucy to her first painting class. Peter had kind eyes but looked very sad, and Emma learned that his wife had passed away just a few months earlier. My wife Margaret always wanted to paint, Peter told Emma quietly while Lucy explored the art supplies. She would look at paintings in museums and say how much she wished she could create something beautiful like that. But she always said she didn't have the talent for it. Now, I think maybe she just needed someone to believe in her. Emma had watched Lucy pick up a paintbrush for the first time, her small face full of wonder and excitement. It was the same expression Emma remembered having as a child. Before she had been told to be practical and give up her dreams, everyone has an artist inside them, Emma had told Lucy gently, kneeling down to her level. Sometimes we just need the right moment to let it out, and sometimes we need someone to show us that it's okay to try. Lucy had painted a picture of a rainbow over the sea that day. It was not technically perfect, but it was full of joy and imagination. When Peter saw it, tears had filled his eyes. Margaret would have loved this place, he whispered to Emma. She would have loved knowing that it's never too late to start something new. Now, as Emma stood in her studio on a quiet evening, she felt her grandmother's presence more strongly than ever. Through the window, she could see the sea that Rose had painted so many times, the same view that had comforted her grandmother through decades of quiet mornings. On Emma's easel was her latest painting, the scene she had created from the letters and her own imagination. It showed a young nurse in a white uniform and a young artist with paint on his hands, meeting for the first time in an Italian garden. Their faces were full of hope and love, and the promise of dreams yet to be fulfilled. At the bottom other painting, Emma had written words from her grandmother's diary. Some dreams don't die, they just find new ways to live. Emma picked up her brush and added the final touches to Michael's face, making sure his eyes showed the same gentle love that had lasted for 70 years as she painted. She thought about all the people who had come to the Arts Center, all the students who had discovered their own creative voices, and all the dreams that were being born in this magical place by the sea. Emma had opened the doors that her grandmother had gently closed so many years ago. In doing so, she had not only found Rose and Michael's beautiful love story, but she had also discovered her own path to happiness and purpose. The cottage that had once held secrets now held hope, creativity, and the promise that it is never too late to follow your dreams.